we're excited to have Simran Jeet Singh and Baljinder Kaur here today with us, who have written, both co-created a beautiful book called Fauja Singh Keeps Going. One of the key reasons I wanted to invite Simran Jeet and Baljinder was it's not often we see stories like Fauja Singh's story in children's books. And in the time that we're living in terms of children, empowerment, education and representation, and also seeing themselves and their faith and their culture represented in a book, it's a very rare thing to see.
Hi everyone, my name is Simran Jeet Singh. I'm the author and I live here in New York City. This is my little flat here in the city, not so big. But yeah, nice to see you all and excited to talk with you all later.
Hi everyone, I'm Baljinder Kaur and I'm from Wolverhampton, which isn't too far from Birmingham at all. I think it's part of it. I'm the illustrator and I'm actually painting right now, so I might do that while I'm talking. But yeah, I'm really excited as well to call them something.
Amazing. Hi everyone, I'm Imi. I'm going to be hosting the conversation later. I'm from the Civic Square team. I'm talking to you live from the canal on a the floating front room. I'm literally on a boat right now. I'm looking forward to chatting to you all later, but for now I think we've got a nice special surprise that Nikki's going to introduce, so look forward to seeing you all in about 15-20 minutes.
It was a sweltering summer. Little Fauja Singh sat under the shade of a banyan tree in his village in Punjab, eating mangoes and watching the other children play. Fauja was smart and funny. He and his friends liked to play cards and marbles while sitting in a circle and telling jokes. But Fauja longed to play hopscotch. But Fauja longed to join them when they ran and jumped. He longed to play hopscotch, to rescue a runaway cricket ball, or to run with a kite flying high across the sky.
He wished he felt as strong as his name, which meant warrior lion. When he was very little, his parents thought he might never walk. Month after month and year after year went by, but Fauja did not take a single step. Aunts and uncles, grandpas and grandpas shook their heads gravely and said, "It's too hard, he's too weak." But Fauja did not listen, and Fauja did not stop. Instead, every morning he would listen to his mother, who said, "You know yourself, Fauja, and you know what you're capable of. Today is your chance to do your best."
Fauja practiced walking outside his family's hut each day, staying in the mud to often fall every fall. He practiced and prayed for months. He could feel himself getting stronger inside and out. A few days after Fauja's 5th birthday, a wonderful thing happened. He took one step and another, then another and another and another. Fauja Singh was finally walking. Fauja's parents were proud that their son understood what he was capable of and that he worked hard to achieve his goals. They were thrilled Fauja could walk because they knew it would make his life easier. His parents were so happy. They said prayers of thanks and distributed prasad to the entire village.
Entire village?
Yes, entire village. Once Fauja began to walk, his legs needed strengthening. He practiced walking around the banyan tree every day. Some bullies thought his legs looked like sticks, and they teased Fauja by calling him Dunda. But Fauja did not listen, and Fauja did not stop. Though his legs were weak, Fauja's spirit was strong.
As Fauja got bigger, it was time to go to school. But the school was miles away from his small village. There were no buses. Fauja's legs could not carry him all that distance, and they couldn't bring the school to him. So while Fauja's friends went to school, he got his education on the farm, learning to plant, plough, and pick all kinds of crops. "It's too hard, he's too weak," said the neighbours, but Fauja did not listen, and Fauja did not stop. He'd walk behind the buffaloes, planting seeds and getting stronger with each step. Fauja worked and worked and worked. He walked and walked and walked. He farmed and farmed and farmed. And when Fauja turned 15, the whole village witnessed a new wonder. Fauja could walk an entire mile. Yay!
Fauja progressed by leaps and bounds, and he took many big steps over the next few years. He got married, he had children, and he even got his own farm. Fauja loved life in Punjab. He loved flying kites in the open fields with his children. He loved the excitement of a close cricket match played with his friends, and he loved the joy that filled the village during the harvest festival of Vaisakhi. He taught his children how to farm, just like his father had taught him. Every morning he would tell his children, "You know yourselves and you know what you're capable of. Today is your chance to do your best." He cherished every step in his life's journey.
As time passed, Fauja's children grew up and moved to places far away. Fauja, who was usually lively and energetic, grew sad and lonely, especially after his wife died. He missed his family. He wanted to be with them, but to leave at the age of 81 to go to live on the other side of the world. Could Fauja do it? His friends were, "You're too old, Fauja." They said, "It's too hard for you to move away." But Fauja did not listen, and Fauja did not stop. He knew it was time for him to take a step in a new direction. One day, Fauja got an airplane for the first time and went to live with his family in England.
Thank you. Amazing. Thank you so much, Waigriki, Prabki, Gurdas and Anand, for all of your time to prepare and doing such a beautiful reading. And I'm just going to welcome Simran Jeet Singh and Baljinder Kaur to the call today. And I'll hopefully, if you're okay with it, I'll refer to you as Simran Bali from now on in. And Nikki will be in the chat helping to connect you to all of these guys on social media and where you can follow their work. But let's kick off with a couple of opening questions, and please make sure that you're asking lots of questions in the chat because the time will fly by, and so I want to make sure I get all your questions in from the audience. So I think we'll start off with Simran. Simran, welcome and thank you for joining us from New York, and especially on a day where the times have gone back, so this is a bit of an odd time for you in the middle of the day. But tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind writing the book. And, you know, I know lots about you. I know you're a runner. I know you've faced lots of challenges yourself as well, with racism, with perceptions from people in the running community. And I'm just interested in your story and what drove you to write the book.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't know. I'm thinking about those kids who are just reading the book, and I'm just so happy because that I mean, to me, that was the biggest reason for wanting to write this book. You know, my childhood, I grew up in a place where there weren't many people who looked like me in South Texas, and there weren't many books that had characters who looked like me, and so. That to me was the biggest reason for wanting to write this book. You know, those feelings of not feeling like my story mattered, or feeling like I was isolated or left out in some way. Like that to me, I don't know. I wanted kids to know that their stories mattered, and I don't want them to feel isolated or left out in the way that I did. And you know, it wasn't the only experience of my childhood. Like I was really happy and had a great childhood, but it always hurt to see books and films and TV shows and never really have people who look like us. And so that to me was the biggest thing. And to see to see these kids reading this book and seeing themselves and their families in this book, like that's the reason behind it all. So I'm just really happy to have this.
Amazing. And I'm going to follow up with another question just to introduce before we go over to Bali, to say, so obviously I can tell why, the obvious reasons for this story, but tell us particularly what drove you to write about Fauja Singh, about his story and particularly his journey, and what made you go for that particularly?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I personally have been touched by Fauja Singh in the sense that I'd always been into sports and athletics, but it was when Fauja Singh set the record that I really felt moved to sign up for my first marathon. So I feel really indebted to him. Not just for turning me into a runner, but also all the beautiful gifts and lessons that I've taken from that. So I think that's probably the biggest thing. But even, I mean, more than that, what really draws me to Fauja Singh's story is the unique experiences he's had in his life and the unique perspectives that he offers. Like there are things that I've never felt myself, right? Like he was an immigrant to a new country, and that was hard. I haven't had that experience. He dealt with disability and he couldn't walk, and I haven't had that experience. And so what does it mean for us to give our kids the chance to see different perspectives and to really empathize with them, to transform our sense of how we want to relate to the people around us that we meet every day, and how we want to imagine who our heroes can be. I think that's what Fauja Singh did for me, just through my own sort of personal relationship, right? Like the fact that he is illiterate really challenged me as like, how could it be that someone who I see as a hero and someone I admire doesn't know how to read or write? And so like learning to see that not as a shortcoming, but as just a part of his story that has to do with the way that his life has gone, like that really helped me connect with him and to challenge some of my own assumptions. So it's that kind of thing that I really love about Fauja Singh's story. There's like the values of perseverance and grit. There's the representation of a community that's not really typically shown. But then there's also this inclusiveness and empathy building that happens through just connecting with the story, and that is something I really wanted to share with the kids.
So amazing to hear. I guess two things really jump out for me from what you said, and I'm looking forward to going into it a little bit more. The thing that jumped out to me that I think sometimes we lose complete perspective about is he essentially restarted his life, in his 80s and achieved things that some of us could only dream about. And it just, for me, sort of really made me think about what it means to kind of be able to, it's never too late to start something, or it's never too late to start a new chapter. And all these incredible things that he's achieved with his running have been later on, and there's a whole story behind that. And I think we've also very personally here in Birmingham, I put lots of pictures on my social media, and I'll carry on, experienced what happened when he came and participated in the great run in Birmingham, which was a kind of a big event that we have here, half marathon with smaller events, and seeing how many children, Sikh children from Nishgam, their families, my nephews and Arden Jeevan, who've just been talking, were out and running and so inspired by that, and then their parents and their families. So can really resonate with, that story of what it means to reimagine who we see as a hero. And really excited to talk about that a little bit more. For now, I'm going to come over to Bali. I have been lucky to know Bali for many, many years. Bali is one of the most wonderful, talented, beautiful souls and illustrators that I've come to know. And so I'm really excited to have you here, Bali. When I heard that you were going to be illustrating this book, I couldn't wait. And then the book came and I was like, wow. There are a lot of pages and there is a lot of drawing. So first of all, let's go right back to the beginning. Tell us how you and Simran met. how did he approach you? How did he persuade you to illustrate this book? And what really drew you to saying yes?
I didn't think he had to persuade me much. I think when the offer came across, it was like, yes, it just felt right. It was like some jigsaw pieces coming together. And it all kind of felt like, I think while I was working on it as well, it just felt like it had been probably leading up to something like this for a while, because I've always been interested in stories like this, and especially the elderly as well. So yeah, it felt very organic and natural as a process. And I felt really lucky, to be honest, to be even picked for it. So thanks, Simran.
Amazing. Let's go into the process a little bit. So tell us about your process. Like, how does one even begin to take on a task like this? And you might be like, well, that's my job, I'm an illustrator, I know exactly how to do it. But you know, when the story came along, how did you start to interpret it? What's the process? What do you do? Where do you go? Do you draw in a book? Do you do it straight on the computer? Tell us about the story of what that looked like, and maybe for lots of the kids listening, they get a bit of an insight into your process of illustration.
Yeah, I think it's definitely changing as it's going along, as I'm learning more and more. But for this in particular, I started with watching a lot of movies where people are running and drawing from that, and especially little kids running. I think that was really inspirational, and also going to park runs. So that was good. But interestingly enough, I enjoy running as well, but not to the extent that you and Simran do. I'm quite a relaxed runner, but I do enjoy it as a way to process and think. So a lot of the time I would be thinking of the story while I'm running and kind of piecing it together in my head a little bit as well, but also just breaking things down. So the initial stage is usually kind of storyboarding everything and breaking the story down into 32 spreads or however many spreads you're going to have, and mapping it out. That was one of the initial stages, and then again just piecing it together as you go along. But I think it always comes back to a very organic process, in the sense that whatever's happening in daily life will feed back into the story in some way, or whatever experience I've had at whatever point it will kind of all just mishmash and kind of bring itself out in some way.
And I've heard you, Bali, talk in the past, sometimes in person, sometimes on social media, through your work, sort of what it feels like to have almost self-doubt as an illustrator and about your work. And I was wondering, like, what's the sort of resonance in this story and Fauja Singh's story, and the story of grit and resilience and their processes? And was there any moments that really resonated for you in the book when you were illustrating it, and how was the experience for you emotionally?
I think definitely the idea of when his mum's saying today is the day to do your best, I resonated with that so much. That was probably, I felt like that was the thing that kind of probably kept me going, and in some ways on, I kind of relate back to that a lot. And that's one of the reasons I really picked out the idea of combing your gears and putting a gunga through your gears, because that's something really personal to me, and referring back to the idea of just getting up and starting again or trying again. Also, I think I learned a lot more about his life while I was working on it. So when I learned that he'd gone through a really depressive state as well, and there's that page when he's kind of, he's felt like he's failed. And the fact that he doesn't feel the burden just for himself, but he feels it for the whole community. And I think I could relate to that, because sometimes I feel like I'm trying to not perform, but I'm trying to connect and tell stories for a whole community, when you shouldn't really feel the burden of that in that way. But yeah, relating it back to that, and the fact that he makes it so simple, in the sense that he's humble enough to kind of just do what he loves, and that's what carries him through. And he makes it really simple for everyone, which is nice. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I do remember a couple of years back when I got to meet him with at Great Run, and I remember the kids asking a few questions, and he was just so like, yeah, you just need to eat your dal roti, so your lentils and your chapatis, and you just need to put your trainers on and get out and run every day. And it was just like the simplicity of it was just so good. But also, if you look at the picture on my social media, Jeevan, who was wandering around in the background of when Anand was reading, was much younger and was messing around a little bit and wouldn't stand for the photo. And so, like a true granddad, he just grabbed Jeevan's arm and was like, right, you're going to stand here, and was holding on to them. And you know, there was just something so everyday and normal. And I really loved that, because then to go and see that same person who you can resonate with literally on the Nike billboards as well, it was just completely bizarre and brilliant and just so normal and everyday. So that was absolutely awesome. Okay, let's come back to Simran, and we've got some lovely questions coming in, so we'll make sure there's lots of time for that. But Simran, you know, I've also followed, even though we've never met, you know, I followed your sort of journey on social media and the things that you've been doing. And I mean, I definitely think, Bali, just to clarify, Simran and I probably make our running look a lot more intense than it actually is. Like, I don't think we're anywhere close to any sort of world records. We like to pretend that, you know, we're going to be the next Wayfarers, I think. You've definitely inspired me with your running as well. But I do remember a couple of years back, you had a pretty awful experience at one of the running events you went to. You experienced some quite severe racism, and you were quite outspoken about that. And I want to kind of link this back to something that Bali also brought up about the pressure of almost having to be the spokesperson for your whole community, or writing for everyone, or representing so many different experiences. Tell us a little bit about that experience, and how you both handle the responsibility of this book, because it's one of the first for our community in this topic, but also how you allow yourself to just be you and experience what you would like to write about and what we'd like to share.
Yeah, that's such a great question. Like, this is the kind of question that can only come from someone who knows what it's like on the inside. So I really appreciate you asking it. The experience I think you're talking about, so there have been a few, but I imagine the one you're talking about, the one that received the most attention, was during the New York City Marathon in 2016. That was 2 days before the US election where Donald Trump was elected. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that it was during that race that I had the most incidents with racism while running. So it's hard to describe, because a marathon itself it's kind of like being in the middle of one is a strange experience, because you're just trying to focus and take whatever positive energy you can from the crowds. In New York City, for the entire 40 kilometers, it's crowds of people. A few 100,000 people show up, and there are 50,000 runners. So there's so much positive energy. Like, it's the coolest thing. That's why I love that marathon so much. And so for something to break your focus, like, it's kind of like, on the one hand, you're trying to remind yourself to not let yourself lose focus. But on the other hand, for me at least, I feel like there's a responsibility. I take this quote from James Baldwin, who's a great American thinker on race and culture. And he says, if I love you, I have to show you the things you don't see. And that's become part of my worldview and my politics. And while I was running, I was thinking, oh man, like, this is something that happens uniquely to me. So I'll give you one of there were 4 incidents that year. The first one was around mile 10 or 11. And I reached for a cup of water from a volunteer at a water station, and she pulled it back and called me a filthy Muslim, and basically told me to go away. And again, like, you're running, so you're like, you don't want to stop and say anything. You don't even fully register what's happening as it's happening. And it took me maybe half a mile or so before, like 5-6 minutes before I fully processed what had just happened. And then I spent the next couple of miles trying to decide, should I say something? Should I go back? Should I tell someone? And I decided, I had my phone with me while I was running. I use it for my pacing and timing and all that. And I said, you know what, I'll just put a tweet out there just to let people know that this happened. And then it happened 3 more times during the race, something similar. So I decided to share something because I had this feeling of, I just want to give people the chance to know what it's like to live in our skin. And that's part of the vision of the Fauja Singh book. Like it's very much this vision of what does it feel like to be someone who has these unique experiences, and how do we use those perspectives and his story to help people connect, right? Like that's the vision for the book, and that's the vision for the activism, and that's it really informs what I try and do. And so like that becomes complicated in a place like the US, where there are far fewer Sikhs. We're relatively invisible here. And we haven't really broken through many barriers, not in the way that we have seen in Canada and the UK and in India and in other places. And so because of that, it happens to be the case that I've made it part of my life's mission to break through those barriers. And I recognize that when I do so, it often ends up being that it often ends up seeming like I am a spokesperson. I try and do what Belly said, which is like always remind myself that I don't speak for anyone or on behalf of anyone. All I'm really trying to do is lift up my community in whatever ways I can. The stories that I tell are my own, or they are ones that I have permission to tell from certain people. But even the way that I tell those stories, I mean, that's my perspective. And you have to be really humble and recognizing that there are other ways of seeing these things and other ways people experience them. So I think it's a balance of the compassion and love for people so that you want to serve them, but also the humility so that it doesn't become about you. That's probably the balance that I try and strike, but it's hard. And then and the last thing I'll say about the politics of it is, when you do break through, and this is something I take from our tradition as well, when you do break through, then you bring other people along with you. And so the vision for this book is, let's make it super successful so that no publishers can ever tell anybody again that, you know, we don't have a market for books like this. And then we open up the floodgates for diverse storytellers, not just in the Sikh community, but other communities too. And I think that's part of the politics too.
Amazing. Thank you, Simran. I certainly I'll speak to a couple of things and then also come to Bali to ask some similar questions around her experience of navigating, your identity, being a spokesperson in many ways, but also how you handle that responsibility, but also how you can just be you. I remember I was looking back to the actual date and I just found the post on my Twitter. It was the 28th of January 2018. I was really, really lucky to come with a colleague of mine to Yale University for a conference. And those of you who know what it's like to be slightly addicted to running, I did a quick scan of what's in the local area and found a 5-mile road run in a place called Milford. And it was about 40 minutes in an Uber. So I dragged us both there and we went and did a 5-miler. And I later found out that the area, like I couldn't put my finger on it. I couldn't put my finger on what was both great about the run. I was so glad to be there because, it's always, for those of you a bit addicted to running, you'll know how exciting it is to find a local race when you're away somewhere. They had spaces, I'd signed up. I'd done a really good run. The timing was brilliant. But there was something off the whole way around. I was sure every time I was getting water, it was a small community and I couldn't put my finger on it. And then about a mile from the end, someone was like really overtly racist and just like knocked the glass of water over as I went to go and try and grab it as I was going, because I was on for a PB. So I was trying to grab the water as I was going. And I couldn't process what had happened. I couldn't figure out, well, who do I tell? Do I say anything about this? If I say something about it, it's like, here we go again. There's all that. They can never have a day where nothing dramatic happens to them that you often see on social media. I get a lot of that. And then I remember looking it up when we got back to the hotel and just looking at the voting pattern of the area, and it was a heavily, heavily Trump voted place. And I was like, there was pretty much an all-white community, and I think we were the only 2 brown people that had run the whole race, which had said something as well. And I'm just, there's this thing, and I want to want you to think about this too, Simran, because I'm going to come back to you in a bit. But sometimes it's like so much of this stuff happens every day, often and all the time, that like, when do we choose to bring it up and to be like, look, this is happening? And when do we just choose to be like, I just want to be me. I just ran a PB and I want to tell you I ran a PB and I want to be excited about that. But I was so disturbed by it as well. And the interesting thing with running is that you, once you get a thought in your head as well, you can't get rid of it. So I remember for the last mile, it probably helped me get the PB, because I was like, oh my God, what just happened? Did I hear that right? Did it really go on? But I think, interestingly, whilst I have loads of experiences like this in the UK, I haven't experienced anything that over in the UK running scene at Park Run, or like that sort of directed at me, than I did in the years after Trump was elected, and seeing how confident people were to just scream their hate into the street. So in a second, I would really like for you to sort of reflect back on that, about, you know, what have you seen in the last couple of years? Are people getting more confident? What's happening? Or is this just something that I experienced when I came to the US? But hold that there. I'm going to come over to you, Bali, and ask you about your experience with that kind of, like you said, the responsibility of almost drawing and representing a whole community, and how do you balance that with just wanting to be you and do what you want to do?
I'm trying not to think about it. I'm kind of in my own bubble. And to be honest, it's a really problematic way of thinking as well, because I don't think anyone should feel as if they represent the community. And especially, I think, from minority and kind of marginalized communities, it seems inherent as if there can only be one story out there, and there can be kind of one perspective out there. But that's, you know, that just kind of, it feeds back into the stereotypical narrative of this is how this community is and this is how this is, and it's completely ignoring that everyone's experiences are different, and there's loads of nuances and there's loads of layers to our beings, and really we should be aiming for, you know, a whole diverse range of people representing the community. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's my own bubble.
Yeah, no, and I think that really, and this is going to be my last couple of questions around this before we come on to some more fun stuff as well. But I think the plurality of our experiences, I think, is so important. I think what I experience quite a lot here in the UK is that lots of external forces like to decide who are going to be, these people are going to speak on behalf of the Sikh community, or these people are going to be the Birmingham Sikh community, or, you know, and I think that is problematic. But also, I'm really interested in what you just said about, you know, what both you and Simran said about, when we make this book successful, you open the doors for many, many, many more. And I think this is really important as well, that we don't replicate those structures that say that because Bali's a wonderful children's book illustrator who is a Sikh woman from Wolverhampton, that there can't be floods more Sikh women, men coming in, sings and chorus, like doing the next layer of that, and we don't become like territorial about that. And I'm really interested in what that looks like, because often structures around us can make that happen and set up competitions that aren't really there at all. And I just want to know, you know, what's your thoughts on that? What's the scene looking like? What talent do you see coming up in the community, and how do you feel about what Simran also said about the plurality of lots and lots of diverse voices being able to be part of the type of work that you guys have done?
Oh yeah, I'm definitely on board with what Simran's saying about that. In terms of the up and kind of coming talent, I think it's really promising at the moment. There's lots more in the past at least 5 years than there was when I first kind of got interested in children's books, and that's really, really great to see. I think the lacking is definitely in the support. There's not enough kind of support out there for aspiring illustrators and artists, and especially in kind of actual professional fields like publishing and yeah, just areas of that where they're not being championed. And although there are efforts, you know, kind of, there's been all these competitions and whatnot for to kind of integrate more BAME authors and illustrators, a lot of the time it just feels like lip service, and it doesn't feel as if these people are actually being supported. And I've got a few friends that are kind of on these programs but again, it's just the people that are leading these programs haven't had those lived experiences and they can't make those connections. So the problems are more kind of on the top level rather than on the kind of grassroots level, which is a shame.
Thank you. Okay, Simran, last question around the experiences that you're having, and then I'm going to come into this. So, you talked a little bit about that first experience in the New York Marathon, being just before or just after Trump was elected, and I mentioned a little bit of my experiences in 2018. I certainly felt it was much more overt than I'd ever experienced here in Birmingham, and I was very surprised by that. What are your sort of reflections? Are things getting worse? Are they more difficult right now? Or, would you just say that it is quite normal in the US for that sort of thing to happen quite often?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, racism in America is not a new thing. It's been here from the outset. But definitely there has been a big surge in the last 4 years since Trump has come to office for the exact reasons that you're mentioning, in terms of people feeling emboldened. Now there's a leader in power and an administration in power who says it's okay to treat people in certain ways, and that can be on the basis of all sorts of identities, whether it's religious or racial or sexual orientation. Or I work in the racial justice, where I actually work with the civil rights organization called the Sikh Coalition here in the States. And one of the things, we track these hate crimes closely. Hate crimes are up across the board. So it's not just an anecdotal, which it's also anecdotal, right? Like, ask any person of color in this country and they'll tell you that things have gotten worse. But just to give you one eye-popping number, in the last year of the hate crime data from the FBI, we saw a 300% increase in anti-Sikh hate crimes. Now, 300% increase, talk to any social scientist, you don't see that kind of an increase in any category ever. And so it's just a part of our reality now. And I think what we, in the advocacy world, in the justice world, but also in our Sikh communities especially, what we're trying to think about is, what does it look like to deal with these problems head on, but also to live with dignity and fearlessness in the ways that our traditions teach us. And so it's a real balancing act, because it's easy for people to fall into victim mentality and to feel like everything is bleak. But I feel like there's real opportunity here. I really feel optimistic about the future. I feel like a lot of the ugliness that's been underneath the surface has been exposed. But I also think there are lots of problems to deal with. So, I guess as a historian, maybe I have some perspective that these things have existed, and now we just have the chance to deal with them. So yeah, I try not to take it personally, and realize that these are broader structural issues that we need to resolve.
Thanks so much for sharing, Simran. I know that you talk a lot about this on many of your platforms, which I can see Nikki and others sharing in the chat. So please do follow Simran to see more of his thoughts and reflections and work, and the Sikh Coalition and many other things he's referenced here. So, okay, let's go back to the book, back to who the book's about, back to what the book's about. And so it isn't published here in the UK yet, but we managed to get a bunch of books from a secret contact that Manny and Nikki got us. Well, we'll tell you more in a bit about how you can get hold of one. But tell us, what's been the response to the book so far? It's just every day on my social media, I see it in some way or another. But let's go to Bally first. Bally, what's been the response to the? You're going to be super humble, so I'm going to kick this off, guys, to say that every day I see people taking snapshots of the pictures and tagging in. I see so much. What's been the response for you so far since the book's been out in the public, and what has that felt like? Also, if you can tell us, have you heard anything from Fauja Singh or Fauja Singh's family about what they thought of it, and a little bit more about the early days of the book being out in the world?
So Fauja Singh's family, no, not yet. But as far as I know, I think he's still in India. But I think Simran might know a bit more about that. In terms of the response, it's been really positive. I was speaking to someone else about this, because they were talking about how do you feel about the book, and I was like, I have two responses, because on a community level, I'm really happy that it's been really successful in the sense that it's been really positive. But I guess as an illustrator level, it's always going to be from the idea of that I'm constantly growing as an artist. So when you look back at your own work, and I think for most people, when they look back at their own work, there's always that ooh kind of factor where you're, because you know you're not the same person that you were when you made that book, and then you know you've grown since. But yeah, I'm really grateful and really humbled that it's been received so well. Nice.
Oh, thanks so much, Belly. I kind of knew you were gonna say that last bit about, like, as soon as I drew it, I was like, I could do better. And it's really funny because I'd be like, you know what, if I produced this as the best work I ever did in my life, I'd be so happy. So it's always just brilliant to me when you're like, yeah, but you know, like now I look back and I think I could have done even better. So that is a very Bally answer. But yeah, I have to say I agree with you. From a community level, I just every day, you know, just seeing the kids pick it up here on the boat, and I'll talk about where you can come and get a copy of it, and just seeing themselves and like the pictures of combing your gis and the gunga. Gis means hair for any of you who don't speak Punjabi, and gunga is a little comb that we use. And just seeing those pictures, even I was just like, oh, I can't believe I could see this in a book, and I can see and touch and feel it. Weirdly, I don't remember a time when I was younger not seeing myself in books. I think I just taken it for granted that we never were going to. The only time I ever remember not being represented, you know, when you used to go to those fun fairs and you'd see all those like name plaques and have everybody's name, like Andrew and John and everything. And weirdly, every time I'd go and look for Imandeep and it wasn't there. And the closest you could ever get is Imogen. And so it's for me, like even as an adult, opening this book and seeing names and seeing the illustrations is really emotional. And so I can tell you as an adult it's beautiful, but to watch the children just be like, of course we're in this book. I wouldn't even know anything different. Like it's not that groundbreaking to them because it's just like, yo, look, a story about us. And I love the fact that it's that normal for them. They're not like, mommy, look, they're just, we've got films now and we've got books and we've got all of this, and there's such high five to you for the work you've done as well on that. So Simran, tell us about what the reaction has been on your end. What's the reaction been like with your daughter, is it? And also, have you heard much from Fauja Singh's family about what they think? Tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, sure. So the reception has been really positive. I've been really pleased. You know, I had been told even before this book went out, I'd been told by people that no one would be interested aside from Sikhs and Punjabis, and that hasn't been true. And I knew in my heart that it had the potential to do more. So I'm just really happy that people have connected with it. So that's one. Number two, it's been really funny. Like the same thing that's been true from childhood has been true here, which is that my parents have been the #1 fans. Like they show up to everything. They talk to me about it every day, whenever they can. You know, in the Punjabi style, they'll be like, "Hod," right? Like you know how we do that. Like their hod has turned into like, "So how's the book doing?" I'm like, it's the same as yesterday. Like they're just so excited, and it's been really fun to share it with them. I think especially, I guess maybe the way to say it is this: like I thought it would be a hit with kids, and that was the main audience. But for people who have felt the pain of not being represented, they have so much joy for this book. And I've had so many people of our generation and older generations, just even if they don't have kids of their own, and reach out to me and be like, I'm just excited for me. And that, I mean, I resonate. I didn't think about that in advance, but I resonate with it because I feel the same way. So I guess that's the second thing. And then with regard to Fauja Singh's family, he has received a copy. He's received a few copies. He's been part of the journey with us. Like Bally went to go meet with him in her process. I met with him in my process. We exchanged a lot of, as the drafts progressed, he saw it. But I think it was really different when he saw the actual book. You know, I felt different when I saw the book. Like it just feels like a real thing finally after years of work. And so yeah, he's been really thrilled. Like I don't know how to put it into words. I guess when I met him the first time, he said something to me about how he wished that he had done more for kids. And now he feels like that's been accomplished. And so there's this like real satisfaction that comes out of that. So yeah, that makes me happy to give back to somebody who has given so much to me.
I'm getting a little bit emotional. And the reason why I think I am is because, and Bali will understand this, Bali illustrated a drawing of my nanny who passed away at the beginning of COVID really suddenly. And I mean, it was so, when that illustration came in the post, like my world just turned around, because it was there, like it was so beautiful, so much love, you could feel it in the illustration. And why I'm feeling emotion is actually because I think the thing that I love most about this project is that intergenerational nature of it. Like, I think, you know, when you guys talk about your parents, and Bali started laughing when your mom and dad were like your biggest fans, because I think my dad's even watching this, you know, it doesn't matter what I do, he's literally like there all the time. And so I know that feeling, but I know that all of us like have a very particular relationship, and our community has a very particular and very deep relationship with its elders. I remember first being drawn to Bali's work when she would often just be drawing like aunties and uncles and Bibia, Babe at the Godara or like wherever, and just like how much it would pierce through me, because I was like, I lived with my grandmother my whole life. And so I can feel it every page we turn. Like, you guys have managed to do something so incredible, which is tell stories of our elders in there, not just all the records that he set, but all the time before that and all the life in India. You've engaged children in it, and it's just so beautiful, and I can really feel it as I turn every page. So I do want to, just before I go on to my last question, I just want to speak to that. Like, there's something really palpable that is beyond just the inspiration for children and, you know, the children's book. Tell me a bit more about that journey with elders, telling their stories, being amongst them, drawing them. You know, I just want to hear a little bit of reflection on that. But can we go to you first? Because I know it's just something that I've always seen you do in your sketchbook, and I don't know if you can expand a little bit more on what this maybe meant in that direction.
Do you mean generally just drawing from life, drawing elders from life, kind of?
Yeah. I'm just interested in your.
I feel like I have a really mundane response now compared to the way you described it. So it's kind of, but I mean, I guess generally as an illustrator, drawing from observation is a big part of your practice, and a lot of it is just down to you're drawing every day from life, so that you develop your own personal visual language, and you develop your own way of doing things, and your own fluency in the way you kind of filter out whatever you're kind of perceiving. And I think one of the reasons I'm kind of drawn to the elderly so much is just because I feel like a lot of the time they're not noticed, and they're quite invisible to a lot of people, even though they kind of carry so much and they've been through so much. And it's just something that's really fascinated me. So I like to kind of draw upon that a lot. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so we're starting to, unfortunately, because we got the time changes slightly wrong with New York. Simran's going to have to jump out a bit sooner than we expected. So I want to go to some of the questions from the audience quickly, and then Bali, I'm going to ask you some questions afterwards so we can wrap up whilst Simran's gone. But Simran, first of all, first question that I'd like to ask you is, it comes from Bing. Tell us about your favourite page in the book and your favourite spread. Like, what's the favourite part of the story? When you open the book, what page are you drawn to straight away?
Great question. So first of all, it changes like as I go through. Second of all, I completely agree with Baljinder that like, as a creator, you're constantly evolving, and you go back and look at your work and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. So to me, like the book is made by the illustrations, and And so when you ask me what my favorite spread is, it's very much defined by how it looks as opposed to what's on the page. But the one I've been thinking about a lot recently is this spread, and Baljinder just referred to it a little bit earlier. And there are a few reasons. Like, I love the artistic expression here, like some of the unique things that Bali does in here. Like, she has this image of the marathon, like that's real, and this portrait of Guru Nanak, which, you know, so many of us had in our homes growing up. But I think what really speaks to me recently has been thinking about the immigration experience. Like, I didn't have one of my own. I was born and raised in the States. I think she really, like, it hit differently for me to, for some reason, or I don't know why, like, I never really connected with my parents' immigration experience in the way that I've connected with Fauja Singh's. And I think it's because I've never really sat down and talked to them about what it was like. Like, I've heard funny stories, that, like, little anecdotes of, like, things my parents found strange and, like, dumb things that they did because they didn't know what they were doing. And but I've never really talked to them about what it's like to leave your life behind and start all over. And I can't even imagine it. But through Fauja Singh, I could. And, like, to see him walking here with his head down, man, I really resonate with that and can feel that pain. And so thinking about xenophobia and anti-immigrant sentiment, and then thinking about his experience like that, that really makes me, I don't know, feel the pain of what that must be like in a way that I never have felt personally.
Thank you, Simran. And I'm going to come to you with the second question that was directly to you, and then I'll come back to Bali before we wrap up. Simran, Baljinder Singh asks, how do you keep your focus on life and everyday things while still maintaining your activism and social media presence?
Good question. I think it's a lot easier when you have a sense of coherence around everything that you do in your life. So, like, if you compartmentalize and say, like, this is the wellness side of what I do, this is work, this is family, and everything is discrete, then it becomes really hard because you're constantly trying to balance. But if you have a singular vision and mission for what you want to do, and then orient everything around that, then it's it feels much more natural. And instead of feeling exhausted by trying to balance everything, then you're energized by those. Like, if your vision is, and I'll tell you mine, like, mine is around love and service. In our tradition, we call it seva. But if everything is oriented around love and service, then instead of feeling like all you're doing is trying to hit every check mark for the day, you feel like, oh, this is amazing, because it's almost like this thing we get from Fauja Singh, which is a real love for life. Like, he loves life and he talks about it, and you feel it when you're with him, and it comes out in the book. Like, he has this spirit, and I think it's because he's not exhausted by what he's doing. He sees real coherence in what he has in his life.
So lovely. And Simran, I know you're gonna slip out in a second. I just wanted to leave you with one question, which is, this talk's also recorded. There's also lots of people and lots of children watching at home. What's your one piece of advice for them if they're looking at this book and they think, you know what, one day I'd like to be an author of a book, or one day I'd like to do some of the things that Simran's talking about, or some of the things I see in here? What's the one bit of advice you'd love to leave them with?
Don't let other people set limits on you, right? Like, that's what we learned from Fauja Singh. People said he couldn't do things all his life, and he kept going. And so that's what I take inspiration from. I try to do that when I feel like there are things that I can't do. So yeah, that's my advice. Thank you all. Thank you for having me. This is really lovely.
Thank you so much, Simran. And you can follow Simran on social media if you've got any questions for him. I'm sure he'll answer some more later on. Bali, as we start to wrap up, I just want to come to you as well. And Simran, I know you have to get on to another thing, so feel free to slip out. We say huge thank you and massive gratitude for your time today, and we hope to catch up again soon. Bali, so I got some closing questions for you as well. I'm going to start with the one from Bing, who I know you know well. What's your favourite spread in the book, and why?
I think I'm the same as Simran, isn't it? I think they change as I go along, depending how I'm feeling. But at the moment, I was just looking through, and I think it's this one here, and it's probably because I'm feeling like this at the moment. But I just love the idea of getting up and showing up. I really like the idea that he's always there, and he's kind of, you know, the idea that discipline is doing something anyway, even if you don't feel like doing it, and just showing up for it. And its success is kind of, you know, doing that constantly, consistently. And I think that really inspires me. So I just love that, because there's some days, like even if it's to do with running, that I don't want to go out of the house, especially as it's getting darker and like gloomier, and I don't want to get up. But if I just tie my distar and wear my joggers, I'll have to go. Like, so that helps. Yeah, I like that.
I feel like you've just literally replicated what I think on this as well, because I do often think that just like the process of tying your distar and having to comb your hair and the discipline of I always say that that's what probably is the most important thing for me in Sikh, is the discipline and the repetition of certain things allow me to turn up even when I don't want to. And like, you know, loads of my team know that I literally wear leggings every day, because then there's some sort of chance that I might put my trainers on and go for a run as well. But on a more serious note, that discipline point really resonates with me, because sometimes just showing up when you really don't want to is some of the most profound sort of moments of my life. And tying a distar and combing your gears, your hair, like every day is like that moment, because once you tidy the star, you're pretty ready, right? Like you're pretty ready. It like neatens you up, it neatens all your mess up, and at that point you're just much more likely. So even on my worst days, I'm like, if I've got to that point, I know, and I can get out the door, I know that things can be okay from that moment. So it's really lovely to hear you also say that, because I guess sometimes it can seem we've all got it together, right? And sometimes just those basic things are what we need to do to get on with the day. Simran and Thian in the audience asked, have you had the chance to meet Fauja Singh? I know Simran says, other Simran Jeet said you had. What was the experience like, Bali?
It was really great, because I knew of him being in the UK especially, and I think maybe in passing, like in Ilford, might have spotted him every now and then, but I think actually sitting down with him just as we were starting the book, I kind of did a little interview, because I wanted to have a bit more of a kind of, I guess, a visual insight into his childhood. So it was really interesting, and we kind of went into his son's, I think he's like a plumbing shop office thing, and we went into the back. It was a small room, but it was just full of trophies and medals and all these kind of photographs, but they were all kind of pushed to the side. And I love how he was really humble, and he was just like, yeah, these are just some of my trophies and and whatnot. But he sat there, and it was really insightful. It was just really beautiful to be with him, and it was quite emotional as well for him, I think, at the time. And he got quite emotional just talking about the idea of youth and energy and being remembered. But I remember that, and we've got some great recordings as well of the day. So yeah, it was nice to meet him.
Amazing. Okay, last question from the audience is from Baljinder Singh as well, and he says, what sort of tools do you use to illustrate, Ali?
Oh, so many things, but I think in particular for Fauja Singh, this was done mostly digitally. So even though a lot of the ideas were kind of just done with pencil and paper, when it came to it, I used a tablet, which is, I can show you, which is like this, and then kind of drawing onto that. So it's still drawing, but with digital pen and ink, I guess, onto Photoshop. That's how that was illustrated.
Oh, nice. And if you follow Bali on Twitter, or particularly on Instagram, Bali often gives like an insight into her drawing and her experience. And we don't have time to talk about it today, but the masters and all the other work you're doing. So it's really beautiful insight into Bali's world. So I think if you would like to, Nikki's put the link in the stage chat, please do follow and share. So yeah, coming up to the last question, Bali. So, like I said to Simran before, there's probably kids in the audience watching, and the video will be near enough eternal, hopefully. What advice would you give to a budding little illustrator. So I'm gonna share this, and I'll share it again in a second. Here's some pictures that Gurdas did with your illustrations. He was one of the young readers before, and his favourite food, pizza, which is on Bali's activity sheets, which I'll tell you more about shortly. But Bali, what's your advice to someone, or not even just kids, someone in the audience is thinking, you know what, I'd really love to experiment a bit, or that's what I really want to do? What would your advice be to budding illustrators out there?
I would give the same advice that I've been given a lot of the time, which is just draw every single day. And it's that simple, drawing every day and letting that build, but letting that be part of your daily practice, and drawing from the world around you and observing the world around you, because it's more about your own unique voice in the way that you see the world. That's important as an illustrator. So yeah, draw every day.
Draw every day. That's a lovely way to end. And I know I'm actually sitting on the boat, for those of you who know, I'm sitting on the boat with Bing, who's just over there, who's our illustrator from the team. And yeah, I often see her sitting here in front of just a plant or anything she's seeing, just drawing and repeating that. So I know how important that is, and recommend you all to just draw every day. So on that note, we've already said thank you to Simran, and I really want to say thank you so much to you, Bali, for your time, for your work, how generously you share, and how often you go past your comfort zone to be able to make us have beautiful things like this book and the many other things that are out in the world that you've shared, and really opening the doors as well for so many other young illustrators, drawers, young people who are inspired by you and your work, and can see themselves in such beautiful ways. So I just want to say a huge thank you for that, and thank you for your time.